Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm not sure what time officially evening begins and afternoon ends. Maybe somebody here knows. There's a lot of smart people in the room. But anyway, good afternoon or good evening, or both. Nice to see so many people here. Welcome to the Secular Hub. We're very excited to have a fantastic visitor, someone who's been on the speaking circuit for 15 years, internationally traveling and talking about science, talking about people's rights, and really actually being someone who stands up and represents those people's rights across the world, and particularly in Texas where he lives. Of course, we would much rather be welcoming Seth Andrews here. He's much better looking. He speaks much more effectively.
I did not expect him to say that.
However, we kind of, we got, I don't know what, second, third best. I'm not sure what the ranking is.
Shots fired.
Yeah. Anyway, Aron-Ra, who you're here to see, I'm sure you all know plenty about him, but he's got 325,000 subscriptions on his YouTube channel. I had the pleasure and the privilege of going to a concert at Red Rocks with Aron a couple of years ago. We went to see the Tedeschi Trucks band. Those of you who know that group, Aron and his wife were visiting us, and we were queuing, as you do, to go into Red Rocks. And a guy came up to Aron and said, are you Aron-Ra? Aron said, yes, as he does. He said, Aron, you changed my life and you saved my life. The work that you do, the videos that you make, the content that you put out really, really helped me. And that was so touching. And it was so real as well. It just happened to be behind us in the queue and expressed what a lot of us, I think, feel about people like Aron who stand up, who take a voice in an ever more increasingly challenging world. I have some more notes about Aron that he wrote. I'm not going to read all of them because we'd be here till 7 o'clock just listening to everything he wanted me to say about him. But Aron is... listen, you wrote this, Aron. I'm just here to read it. Aron has got a Bachelor of Science in Anthropology from ASU's School of Human Evolution. And I know that he does a lot of work in Texas with the Texas Board of Education, who are trying to make our population more dumb and less informed and less educated. It's fantastic work. I'm going to ask you all, please, to just hold your questions until we finish. We will have plenty of time to have a discussion and discourse, but let's let Aron build up a head of steam and just keep rolling as he does. And when he's had enough, then he'll ask us for questions. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Aron-Ra.
Thank you kindly, sir. Okay. As an unbeliever, I usually have to talk about what I don't believe. And I will have to talk about that again today, but I would like to add some things that I do believe, because I don't get the opportunity to do that very often. I've been debating religious extremists online on a daily basis for close to 3 decades now. And what I have slowly come to realize after all that time is that whatever the topic is, science, history, philosophy, morality, comparative mythology, scriptural analysis, logic, psychology, no matter what the relevant subject is, the believer doesn't know what they're talking about. You can try to educate them on any given point and show them citations to prove that you got it right, but they will not correct themselves. They will still repeat the exact same errors again tomorrow with the next guy, or still with you. That's how they keep arguing the same subject for years on end and never get and still get absolutely everything wrong. They never get any better at it, because the God helmet stops reason from getting through. So there's no learning going on. May as well try to reason with a barking dog. The purpose of science is to improve our understanding. And the way to do that is to find the errors in your current perspective and correct them. The purpose of religion is to make believe. And to make you believe whatever you're told to. And you better believe it or else. That means rationalizing some way to cling to the same unsupported, unreasonable, illogical, and irrational conclusion, no matter how wrong it is constantly shown to be. So I've spent 3 decades trying to reason with people who have forsaken reason, who do not want to understand, and who actively try to keep themselves confused so that they don't understand. How else could it be that they've been arguing against evolution for so many months or years and they still don't know what evolution even is? Do you think that maybe in all that time somebody might have told them something before you know? How is it that they still don't know anything? Because they don't want to. I quote academic sources and provide links to those quotes. Then I ask the believer to confirm whether they understand the definitions or lessons and whether they accept that this is how evolution is actually being taught in universities, that it's not teaching immoral godlessness nor devil worship either. But to my experience, believers seldom, ever bow to any fact, no matter how well confirmed. Instead, they double down on whatever wrong thing they said it was and will never admit any significant error, ever. They also cannot accept that evolution is not a religious belief, not even when I point out that it is the only explanation of biodiversity, scientific or otherwise, and that even young Earth creationists have to refer to it at some point, like when they want there to be a manageable few created kinds on Noah's Ark, but they also need those few to immediately and instantly evolve or explode into millions of new species as soon as each breeding pair steps off the boat. They actually argue against gradual macroevolution by pleading for a supercharged, hyper-accelerated, and over-caffeinated electro-mega evolution. They also complain that abiogenesis proposes that life arose by unguided, undirected, aimless, unintelligent, accidental, purposeless, unplanned, mindless, random, and blind processes. All those words mean the same thing. What is the problem with reality being evidently incidental rather than impossibly intentional? Why does there have to be an intended meaning of life? There doesn't. The whole notion is silly. All the arguments from religious apologists are, I'm going to be delicate and polite, no I'm not, stupid and wrong and contradictory. But the important issue is why they are. In the naivety of my youth, I assumed that other people thought about things the same way that I did. That if you asked me as a boy what I believed, I would tell you, but I wouldn't stop there. I would give you the reasons why I believed whatever I did. Then if it turned out that my reason wasn't good enough, like if you showed me that a claim of fact turned out not to be true, or that it doesn't really imply what I thought it did, then I wouldn't find some other excuse to keep believing in the same thing. Once I find out that my evidence is invalid or insufficient, I have already stopped believing. That is how I believe it should be for everyone. But that is not how it is for anyone who believes on faith. The faithful tell me that I can choose to believe whatever I want. They do. They believe whatever they want to just because they want to, and they'll never change their mind because they don't care about reason. They believe in belief, as if believing something hard enough will make it come true. I can't be that way. If I could choose to believe whatever I want, I'd be a Jedi. But I have no choice. I am rooted in reality and compelled to consider whatever the facts indicate, even if I don't like it. I have to accept that it is what it is. Whereas believers say, no, it isn't, as if it's not what it is. As an adult, I was alarmed to find that when I asked religious people why they believe whatever they do, they never gave answers that would convince me to believe the same thing too. They never included reasons determined by evidence. They could never give me reasons that count as reason. Instead, they would say things like, I believe in God because I want to know that I will see my dead son or father again. That doesn't make any sense. If you believed in God, it wouldn't necessarily mean heaven and all of that too. I mean, you could believe in God, but that would also mean that you could believe that you'll see your dead friends and relatives. But it doesn't mean that you know that you will. There's a huge difference there. You're just compiling assumptions atop other assumptions with no substance or basis to any of it. Nothing you can actually show and thus know to be true. If you think the Bible is evidence of Jesus, wouldn't that logically mean that the Bhagavad Gita is evidence of Lord Krishna? But Christians can't understand logic. Believers were also taught that other people believe differently. Not that we're believers and they're unbelievers, but that we believe this and they believe that. So that even unbelievers believe. And the things that they say we believe are just as silly as what they believe. You believe that life formed and then diversified according to a series of unguided natural processes? What a coincidence. I believe in a magically animated mud golem who was cursed by a talking snake. I was on a podcast with a Christian minister, and I asked him whether snakes can talk. And his answer, live on camera, was, if you believe in a God who can do anything, then you believe that a snake can talk. And I have to translate that to mean that this minister has given up reason and is completely irrational, yet still attempting to debate a rational skeptic live on air. They know they can't defend their favorite fantasy folklore, so instead they try to shift the spotlight onto you to criticize what they say is your belief. This is why they say things like, you believe you came from a rock. That one came from the convicted fraud and charlatan Kent Hovind. His interpretation is that the earth is a ball of rock, just rock, nothing else, and that life comes from earth. Therefore, he says, life comes from this earth, this rock that we call earth. But I got him to admit that water is not called a rock, even when it's frozen solid as ice. So the earth is not just rock, it is also metal and fluids and other things that are not rock. But Hovind misses or ignores where the science textbooks talk about organic chemistry that leads to life but does not include rocks nor come from rocks. But he still says that evolution teaches what it never taught. Geologists define a rock as a bound of aggregate of minerals, and they define a mineral as an organic, solid, crystalline substance. None of that applies to the construct of the earliest and most basic original forms of life, who didn't begin to incorporate minerals until later on. But if you're determined to believe in a lie, then you will lie for that belief. So Hovind keeps on saying that we believe what he knows none of us believe. Here's one I hear almost every day, and I've heard it almost every day for years. You believe everything came from nothing. Anybody heard that? Okay. But no, we don't believe that. Someone might have said something like that once upon a time, decades ago, maybe. But I don't know any atheist alive who believes that there was ever a time when there was ever absolutely nothing. Not even Lawrence Krauss believes that. The title of his book was a bit tongue-in-cheek. He explained in a presentation he was giving that his book redefines nothing. And he told me that would confuse people. And I replied, agreeing, saying, yes, I am confused by nothing, and Lawrence Krauss understands nothing. He did not like the way I phrased that. Most models of cosmogony start out with a singularity that already exists before the beginning of time, or as a remnant of a cyclic or collapsing prior form of the universe. So cosmic inflation had a beginning, but the universe itself did not. There was no creation moment. The very first law of thermodynamics says that material energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So it wasn't. However, when I try to explain that to a believer, there is never a concession or admission that I don't really believe what they said I did. They will still tell me that I believe that, even when they know I don't, as if they know my mind better than I do. And here's a comment I got a couple of days ago. The evolution theory has fallen apart since the beginning. Almost no one actually understands your folly, except actually believes a clump of cells appeared and then came alive alone, then turned into everything, including strawberries and lions. So according to you, a cat evolving into a dog isn't so far-fetched. I don't believe any of that. So much stupid in one paragraph, where every sentence has at least 2 errors in it. Of course, evolution is still one of the best supported theories in all of science, right up there with atomic theory. If you're worried about atomic bombs, just remember, atoms are just a theory. According to the National Academy of Science, and even according to some Christian biologists, evolution is the foundation of modern biology. So it is clearly not the folly that creationism is. Creationists love to accuse us of being them, of doing whatever it is that they're guilty of. He is right about one thing, though. No one who understands evolution believes what he said we do. That a clump of cells appeared and then came alive alone? No. First of all, that's not even evolution. That's abiogenesis. Then they were already alive and they were never alone. They didn't just appear either. You got everything wrong. They always do. There are a series of cumulative but unrelated processes in several different chemical environments before you can even have cells. And I can cite peer-reviewed experimental studies for literally dozens of the sequential stages in the developmental origin of life where creationists imagine there is only one. And then there was a couple billion years of proliferation, evolving diverse populations after the first living cells and before some of them began to become communal. I explain to creationists all the time that life is really complex. So the origin of life is going to be really complex too. It's not like their distorted parody where you have lightning striking a mud puddle, and it's not like their own mythology where you have a virtual genie saying abracadabra, poof, there it is. If you can't understand evolution, which is relatively simple, I understood it at 8. But if you're an adult and you still don't get that much, there's no way you're going to understand any of the stages of abiogenesis, especially not if you refuse to learn any of the evidence outside of chemistry showing us that this definitely happened. Then this guy said that these cells turned into everything, including strawberries and lions. Again, no, they didn't. No ancient microbe ever turned into any modern organism. Instead, there's a vast taxonomic hierarchy of different lineages and their own successive slight modifications over many generations, and these are evidenced both in taxonomy and paleontology. At some point, a couple billion years ago, a eukaryote cell enveloped a form of rickettsia bacteria that did not die. Instead, that began a symbiotic relationship where the host feeds and houses the guest, and the guest produces energy for the host. The two cells even reproduce as one in synchronicity, so that very soon there were trillions of cells like this. This is how mitochondria came to be. And this is why mitochondria has bacterial DNA, different from the DNA of the host cell. And this is what the common ancestor of strawberries and lions looked like. Then there are several dozen named clades of further specification modifications, eventually leading to lions, and there's another separate but similarly long lineage of descent with inherent modification, evolution by definition, leading to strawberries. And finally, he said, so according to you, a cat evolving into a dog isn't so far-fetched. Again, no, not according to me. I don't say stupid things like that. Instead, we have fossils from 55 million years ago of a cat-like, dog-like, generalized animal that is apparently basal to civet cats, bear cats, meerkats, false cats, and true cats on the feline side of the carnivore and family tree, as well as weasels, dogs, bears, and seals on the other. And then we have DNA from each living member of both groups to confirm this type of relationship, proving that they evolved from a common ancestor who would have lived right when this fossil did. Yet despite all the evidence, believers will tell me that you believe in evolution on faith because there's no evidence. And this one is funny because they usually say that right after I've posted the evidence that they refuse to discuss or consider. It's also funny because the faithful like to pretend that I'm wrong about my definition of faith being an unreasonable position assumed without reason and defended against all reason. When they're talking about their belief, then they say that faith is simply a trust in the evidence. But what they're calling evidence is only circular assumptions of subjective impressions, not actual facts that indicate. If they're talking about any of the literal tons of evidence for evolution, then they lie and deny that the evidence even exists and contradict themselves by admitting that my definition of faith was right all along. And just to be explicitly clear, I don't believe anything on faith. In fact, I don't believe anything in the same context that believers do. And you may be thinking that to believe something simply means that this is what I think is most likely true or closest to the truth, but I can't prove it. I don't know it because I can't prove it. And that would be fair. That's a reasonable definition. But the self-proclaimed believers define belief differently in a different context than unbelievers do. To them, belief is an act of will to consciously convince yourself of what is not evidently true. Belief means make believe. I don't believe anything in that context, but I know how believers like to equivocate. So I don't say faith if I mean trust, and I usually won't say believe unless I talk about how believers lie to themselves and others. I am an epistivist. That means that I reject faith as an unreliable path to truth. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said that faith is not wanting to know what is true. And his contemporary in the Giant Mustache Club, Mark Twain, wrote that faith is believing what you know ain't so. I think both men got it right. Believers have to pin their faith on us as part of the tu quo qui fallacy of you're just as bad. But we're not just as bad. We don't have faith like they do. They don't have evidence like we do. They're trying to create an illusion, a false equivalence, as if their baseless assumptions of impossible absurdity are somehow equal to our demonstrably accurate understanding of verified fact. They're always trying to say that we don't really know what they know, so that they can pretend as if they know what they don't. I knew a professor of philosophy who said that faith is pretending to know what you don't know. I think he got that right too. Many times believers have told me that if there was no one there to see it, then you can never know what really happened. They don't apply that logic to their own position because they like to pretend that the scriptures are somehow an eyewitness account, which we know it isn't and can't be. But to get them to understand forensic evidence, I ask them this. Let's say you're staying in a little house in a remote rural area. You go outside in the morning and you see that it snowed last night. You didn't see the snow falling down from the sky, but there it is on the ground. Is there any other way that the snow can blanket everything? Of course not. Unless it just miraculously appeared there. So is it merely an assumption that it snowed last night? Or do you know it that it did, rather than assuming a miracle instead? Now, as you walk around your little house, you see the familiar pattern of a trail of boot prints coming out of the forest and wandering up to your house. On closer inspection, you see that that's a pattern of hiking boots. Now, you didn't see what boots they were. You didn't see the person wearing them, the person who was walking there. You weren't there to see that, but you know that this is the exact pattern of hiking boots. They're not cowboy boots or tennis shoes. They're certainly not sandals either. The only other thing they could be is biker boots, but that wouldn't make any sense this far down a dirt road. You know? So, is it just an assumption that, or do you know that those were most likely hiking boots? Then, as you follow that trail of boot prints, you notice that they go right up to your daughter's window, facing the window, before walking away again. Worse, as you get up there, you realize that there's not just, standing prints. They've shifted a couple of times so that somebody was looking into that window for a while before wandering off again. Now again, is that just an assumption? Or do you know for a fact that somebody walked up there and stared into your daughter's window when you weren't there to see it? The faithful do not answer that question because they know that faith is the most dishonest and auto-deceptive position it is possible to have. That's why they're always desperately trying to project their own worst fault onto us, we skeptical analysts who understand that knowledge is usually only provisional and that faith is not a virtue. It's a vice that should be rejected by every honest person. Defenders of the faith are always trying to turn our lack of belief into belief in a lack because they can't understand not believing something. They think that everything has to be a matter of belief. Recently, I made a video about a Catholic apologist who said that he could prove that atheism is irrational, but he could only do that by strawmanning us, by using a definition of atheism that we do not use. First, he rejected our well-documented historical definition of a lack of belief in the existence of God, insisting that we have instead a positive belief in the non-existence of God. But worse than that, he then redefined atheism not as a belief nor a lack of belief, but as a declaration that God does not exist. There are people, including some scholars, who really do believe that this is and always was the primary definition. It's not. I don't think it ever was. I know it didn't start out that way, and it damn sure isn't that now. I suspect it was a believer who came up with that definition because, to my experience, believers cannot even conceive of non-belief. So they try to turn our rejection of belief in their claim into a claim itself, a counterclaim to theirs, so that they can then challenge us to prove atheism, which sounds ridiculous to me. How do you prove that I don't believe you? But the way they've described it is now it's our job to prove that there is not a God. We now have to prove the negative argument because they can't substantiate their positive claim. Many times in my youth, I've been told that if I don't believe in God, it means that I worship the devil. If I don't believe in your magic imaginary friend, I damn sure don't believe in his imaginary enemy. I told a guy once upon a time who told me that I believed that I worshiped Satan because I didn't believe in God. He said, well, if you don't believe in God, then you don't believe in the Bible. The Bible is the Word of God, and the Bible says you're either with me or against me. So if you're not with me, then you're against me, which means you're in league with Satan, which means you worship Satan. I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. I said, I don't believe in Daffy Duck either. Does that mean I worship him too? So it's so amusing to me that Satanists don't believe in a literal Satan. Neither the Satanic Temple nor the Church of Satan. Never did. So fine. You want to tell me that I am a Satanist? Okay. I'm a Satanist. Now let's talk about equal treatment of the freedom of religion under the law. Because Christians are all about faith-based initiatives until the Muslims want a state-funded religious school, or when the Satanists want to put a statue of Baphomet up next to the Ten Commandments. Only then do the Christians figure out, well, we're supposed to be a secular government. We're not supposed to have... Yeah! It seems that the only strategy believers have against unbelievers is to turn us into believers by strawmanning our position as if we're the ones with the burden of proof to prove a negative, that there is no God, as if we're the one with a faith-based belief in no Godism. They have to do that because, one, they're forbidden to admit when they're wrong, even when they know they always are, and two, they definitely already know that they can't defend or substantiate their own position, which is consequently indefensible. The Catholic apologist went on to say that atheists are irrational because, he put it, we all assume the truth of a system of thought that is materialism. Materialism is not a system of thought, and we don't assume the truth of it either. He described materialism as the belief that the material universe is all there is, that there is nothing more than what we as yet perceive. Which is funny because I'm a materialist. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go so far to say that the universe is limited to whatever we can perceive right now and that there can't be anything else. It's just that there's no evidence of anything beyond that. And until there is, we shouldn't waste our time in pointless speculation. Hitchens' razor demands that positive claims require positive evidence, but that what is asserted without evidence may be dismissed without evidence. That is not the same thing as declaring it that it doesn't exist. Substantiate it first. Then we'll have something to talk about. I view materialism not as a belief in nor the restriction of unspecified or unverified limits of reality, but as a non-belief in the specific type of immaterial that the make-believers are pleading for. Materialism means accepting that there is an apparent material reality, but not also assuming a supernatural alternative reality. And what does supernatural mean? In this context, what the people are talking about is that they're talking about miracles, magic, gods and ghosts and devils and that sort of thing. So in other words, materialism means that I accept the real world that we can verify as evident, and I don't believe in magic. The only way to disprove materialism is to show that magic is real. Believers hate the burden of proof because they know they can never meet it. There is no actual factual evidence nor logically valid arguments either for the type of supernatural world of pure imagination that the faithful want to pretend, but they are determined to believe it anyway. How dishonest is that already? And the only way to create the illusion of equivalence is that they can pretend that a perfectly reasonable unbelief is an unreasonable counterbelief, as unreasonable as their belief is. So some religious philosopher told me that if he says something and I don't believe him, then it cannot be that I simply don't believe he is telling the truth. Instead, he says, I have to hold a positive belief that he is not telling the truth, that he is wrong or lying. But what if, hypothetically, he says he's rich, but he's in an awkward situation at the moment, such that if I do him a favor, like give him a ride somewhere, he might give me $1,000 for my trouble. I might give him a ride anyway, just because he's a person in need, even if I don't believe him. I don't necessarily believe that he's wrong or lying or delusional, even if I think that is probably the case. It is not yet certainly so. So I remain open to the remote possibility that he might make good on his promise. Thus, I don't believe either way. Despite the probability that he is insane or whatever, I remain hopeful. So while I don't think he is telling the truth, I don't necessarily believe that he's lying either. Note that there can be degrees of uncertainty between being convinced of either possibility or some unexpected other option. I know that other philosophers can accept that, especially those who call themselves agnostics. By the way, if you don't know what that means, just understand that an atheist is one who does not believe there's a God, but an agnostic is someone who doesn't know that they're atheist. Imagine one of these smug students of philosophy dies and somehow finds himself in an afterlife, standing before the pearly gates. And St. Peter asks him, "Do you believe in God?" Because St. Peter is Joe Pesci for some reason. It's a yes or no question. If yes, all may be forgiven. If no, then it's eternal damnation, the one unforgivable sin. But the agnostic says, well, I'm not an atheist because while I'm not convinced that there is a God, I'm not convinced that there's not one either. How would St. Peter respond to that? To hell with you, atheist! He pulls the lever, the trapdoor falls, the guy plummets to hell screaming, but I'm a special consideration. As if this belief system cares about nuance. I understand that there are not only shades of gray between the two extremes of black or white, but that other considerations, such as would have to apply to properly evaluate every personal position of billions of people, would necessarily lead to a spectrum of color when all things are considered. But if all you can see is high contrast black or white, then you can't see color or gray. Everything is binary, either up or down, good or evil, heaven or hell. Mainstream monotheism offers believers an impossible promise of a posthumous reward, and unbelievers face the threat of a fate worse than death in the form of relentless, merciless, excessively cruel, and vindictive torture for all eternity. You think a religion based on authoritarian control, compulsion, and forced conformity cares about extenuating circumstances for some wishy-washy, fence-sitting centrist pleading for special consideration? If everything is either or, where did the agnostic think we were going to put him? In neither nor? Remember, the Pope has already canceled purgatory. Believers might be saved, but unbelievers are always damned. Atheists and agnostics are both in the same boat. The express elevator to hell, going down. I met another agnostic online recently, somebody praising the superiority of agnostic atheism. At least he admitted that he was atheist. But he defined that position not as the absence of both knowledge and belief, but as a belief in two possibilities. He believes both mutually exclusive conclusions at the same time, while he also apparently believes that just an atheist alone would be a belief in only one possibility. I would have said that that is not a belief in sufficient probability. When I tried to show him a host of authoritative sources for what agnostic means or what atheist means, he rejected all of those definitive sources, telling me that none of these experts, nor I, knows what an atheist is. He said it's not an absence of belief, but a belief in absence. Which makes me wonder why it is that those who emphasize their agnosticism pretend to know so much more than they do. For many years, I was agnostic too, back before I knew what the word atheist meant. I was simply not convinced that there was a God. I figured there was probably no God. I was simply not convinced. The Bible certainly isn't true. All you need to do to know that the Bible is not the Word of God, that is only the inane ravings of superstitious savages, is to read the damn thing. The reason, and I said this, I love this, I said on Irish radio, I was having a debate with a bishop, and I said on National Irish Radio that the reason that the Bible is absolutely wrong about practically everything is because it was written by ignorant, bigoted, superstitious savages who obviously had no idea what they were talking about, ever. I love that I said that on national radio in Ireland. Even if there was a God, and even if Christianity was true, then evolution would still be a verifiable fact of population, genetics, fossils, and phylogeny, while the scriptures of every religion would still be already falsified folklore, with little or no truth in it, being largely indefensible, immoral insanity throughout. Not even the existence of God would change either of these facts. But still, I thought there might be a God. If not the Christian God, then maybe some higher concept of God, or a multiplicity of pantheons. You've heard the parable of the 5 blind men trying to describe an elephant. You know, one has the ear, one has a trunk, one's feeling its belly, one has a tusk, and one is holding its leg or its tail or whatever. I think it was 6 men. But they all give correct but incomplete and misleading descriptions of what that elephant is. So even if there was an invisible elephant, none of those blind men can claim the absolute truth that religious believers do. Christians tell me this parable in order to explain why there are so many different religions, but they don't understand that the parable implies that Christianity is just as wrong as every other religion, when they're all claiming absolute truth. So once upon a time, I believed, or rather wondered is a more appropriate word, I wondered whether there is a God, some root behind the violently conflicting religions of the world. Of course, if there was a God, a real God, one true God, and he gave a damn about what or whether we believed, then there wouldn't be a bunch of religions, would there? He would straighten all that out himself, personally, publicly, unambiguously, and finally. Because a just God would not allow a hell to exist, nor would any moral God ever allow anyone to be damned over what or whether they believed, regardless of whether they were good or bad. If they didn't believe in God, or if they believed in the wrong God, that would be God's fault. And God would have to know that. He would know that it wasn't their fault. Don't tell me about Pascal's wager. Pascal seemed to forget that there were other faith doctrines before and besides Christianity, and that he might have chosen or was born into the wrong one. So you hypothetically not only believe in God, but you dedicate your life to God. You renounce the pleasures of the flesh so that you don't even get to enjoy the one life you really do get. And instead, all you know are the lies of your doctrine, which is the only thing you read. And you devote yourself to meditation and prayer to your magic imaginary friend according to the religion of your cultural ancestry. But then when you die, you find out that's not the right religion, and you're going to be tortured savagely in hell for all eternity as a sinner? Because Christians are going to Muslim hell, and Muslims are going to Christian hell, and the only thing that any of them can hope for is that they'll all come back as cows. If Pascal had considered and compared other religions, then his wager would have favored atheism, because nobody knows which religion is right, and there's no reason to believe that any of them are. The various scriptures of every religion were all written entirely by mere fallible men. Yet many of them are presented as the absolute truth of the revealed word of the one true God. Thus, it is logically impossible for every religion to be absolutely true. But it is possible and probable that they are all absolutely wrong. I knew that even as a kid, but I still thought there might be a God, because I still believed in supernatural things. So I remained open to what I thought then was a possibility, because I'd been misled by the media to believe some other elements of the supernatural had been confirmed somehow. I had heard and read myriad claims of supernatural events, demonstrations of psionic aptitude, reports of mass sightings of spectral apparitions, and ectoplasm being collected by parapsychologists, Ghostbusters. The problem is that even if you credulously accept most of these, if you also accept the fact that maybe at least some of these individual claims might not be entirely true or described completely accurately, then what do you do? How do you tell which ones are fact and which ones are fiction? If that matters to you, which it definitely does to me, then the problem is that none of them are fact. An honest person would not want to say that something is true until they can show that it is, because otherwise how would you even know if it is? But most of these accounts came from sources that couldn't be investigated, being people who were long dead or living behind the Iron Curtain or whatever it is. There was never any way to verify any of these claims, none at all. If you're able to admit that not everything everyone ever claimed about the supernatural is absolutely true, then how can you be sure that any of it is? It can't all be true, but it can all be false. When someone tells you that they've seen or felt something, how do you discount that? More importantly, how can you verify it? There's always the possibility that they're only imagining things. And how can you check to see whether it's possible that it really happened? I thought that the best way to know how much, if any, of this was real was to explore the occult and experience the supernatural myself, which I did for years. Eventually, I had several of my own paranormal experiences, both as a reborn Christian, which I was for at least a few hours, and then later as a neo-pagan spiritualist practicing transcendental meditation. I have witnessed supernatural manifestations multiple times and always believed that I was really seeing something in that moment. I would even testify to these experiences to others, only to see Christians automatically discount my testimony, worse than I would ever discount them. What hypocrites! Here they are listening to an eyewitness testimony which they value even over the facts and evidence, and they just automatically discard it without consideration, just like they do with evidence too. Why do they think that I should be compelled by anything they tell me when none of it makes any sense, and I already know better than most of it, when they won't even consider my testimony to them? They automatically assume that I'm delusional or lying or insane, but they would be outraged if I thought the same about them. Remember the scene in Ghostbusters when Janine said, "Do you believe in UFOs, astral projection, mental telepathy, ESP, clairvoyance, spirit photography, telekinetic movement, full trance mediums, the Loch Ness Monster, and the theory of Atlantis?" Back when that movie came out, I believed in all of those things. But I tried to investigate every one of them, not to prove them wrong. You don't need to disprove what was never just substantiated. No, I wanted to investigate each of these things so that I could know how much truth there was, if any, to any of these. However, one by one, I eventually had to admit there was no truth to show to any of them. Again, open to the possibility, but starting to realize that there is not even a possibility. Sometimes my own supernatural experiences happened in the company of people that I knew from back in high school and such, and the people that were there and took part with me. However, decades later, when I began to doubt my own memory of these experiences that I once proudly touted and recalled so clearly, I used the internet to connect with a couple of the people who were most important to me then, who were there. And I talked to them about the different experiences that we had with each other. And much to my surprise, not only did neither of them remember these experiences the same way that I did, they didn't remember it at all. Both of them had somehow become unbelieving skeptics, just like I realized I was becoming too. And despite all that I've just told you, I have never believed anything in the sense of trying to convince myself of what is not evidently true, the way self-proclaimed believers do. Rather, I prefer to weigh multiple hypotheses at once, whenever possible, whenever there are indicated possibilities to consider. God, however, is not a possibility. You need a precedent or a parallel or a verified phenomenon to indicate whether a possibility exists, and you don't have that for God, nor for anything allegedly supernatural. Instead, God is defined by his miraculous nature. Because the miracles share essentially the same definition as magic, the evocation of supernatural forces to control or forecast natural events in ways that are inexplicable by science because they defy the laws of physics, and anything that defies the laws of physics is thus physically impossible by definition, and thus God is impossible by extension. Again, note the difference between not having an indicated possibility, meaning you're not able to say whether it is possible, and having an indicated impossibility, meaning that you can say that it is impossible. There is a limbo there, just like the degrees of uncertainty between mutually exclusive opposing beliefs. And this is why even senior researchers in near-death experiences have realized that after 50 years of study with very few cases that don't have a clear explanation, they still can't show that there's a there. I've interviewed several neuroscientists and even a couple of famous cognitive neurophilosophers, and what I hear from all of them is that there is no support for mind-body dualism. They say conclusively that there is no such thing as an immortal soul that survives the death of the physical body. Not just because there's no evidence of it. Right precisely where it would be if such was real is that there is substantial evidence against it. Without a soul, then logically there cannot be an afterlife. Without any sort of afterlife, then the notion of God is moot. Even if there was a God, no one would care unless they can also live forever after we die, because that's what it's all about. Religion is a denial of reality, especially, in whole or in part, especially the reality of death. Also, the less you understand, the more you're likely to deny. If you're not very smart, you might deny the moon landing while somehow believing in a global flood. If you don't know much of anything at all, you might be a flat earther. The one that irritates me the most are the ones who believe that the Matrix is real, that the universe is a simulation, but that there's no reality to simulate. As if we're all just a dream of Brahma and nothing is real, man. I can't gather the patience to even try to reason with somebody that far gone. If you've ever argued with religious believers online, you may have noticed that what it took me decades to see, that all of their arguments are stupid and wrong and based entirely on frauds, falsehoods, and fallacies, and some of them only believe in lies. If it's something that we could prove to be correct in a moment on Google, they don't want to know that. If it's something we could easily disprove just as quickly, that's what they fervently believe, regardless of the evidence to the contrary. Again, in the naivety of my youth, I thought that if you show someone the logical steps and necessary facts to prove that they're wrong, then they will have to bow to that and stop repeating that same error now corrected. That is what I have to do, but that is not what religious apologists ever do. If I declare something to be a fact, and you can show that I was misinformed or misled or that I misunderstood something, whatever the reason, such that it comes out that what I said was wrong, I'm going to be embarrassed. I also won't repeat that error, but more importantly, I'll be embarrassed. But faith believers are not. They don't care that they're always wrong on every subject, every time. They're taught not to have pride. But pride comes attached to two other things: honor and shame. If you have no pride, then you have no honor, and you will not feel shame. One of my confrontations with the State Board of Education in Texas, one of the creationists there shamelessly admitted that he knew that there were transitional species in the fossil record, but he said that he was going to teach students that there were none. Knowing that that's not true, he was going to teach students that there were none because he said it was important that they believe there are none. Another board member at a different time said that they were going to teach American exceptionalism, whether it's true or not, because they needed students to believe that the United States was founded on a covenant between the Christian God, and man. That's what our Constitution is somehow based on the Ten Commandments. And it didn't matter that we had expert professor historians with documentation to prove that that wasn't the case. They're going to teach it anyway because they believe in belief. They both openly and shamelessly admitted that they think it's okay to lie if you're lying for Jesus, to deliberately mislead and deceive other people's children if it causes some of them to believe in the same preferred set of lies, religion, that you believe in. It is that injustice that motivated me as an activist promoting rational science education over the religious extremist reality-denying superstitious fundamentalism. Earlier this week, someone posted a comment that I want to share with you. Imagine spending a great part of your life simply trying to influence people that there's no hope. Aron-Ra, you are nothing more than a highly intelligent and extremely well-spoken preacher of no hope. What is your purpose, sir? These people imagine that their belief, that they on some degree they know is not true. They think that their belief offers comfort, purpose, moral guidance, and hope. No, it doesn't. None of the above. I can have all of that if I want it without having to make believe impossible nonsense for no good reason. Anyone who uses the Bible as their exclusive moral guide would be a criminal in every country on this planet. And I see the afterlife, their afterlife in heaven, as a form of damnation. Eternity is inescapable. a fate far worse than death. I would rather die, literally, than live forever in heaven. I see faith as insane, irrational, illogical, mentally debilitating, and ultimately dishonest. Seriously, you may as well tell me that Bugs Bunny loves me. That's how empty your promise is that Jesus loves me. That's how real the possibility of your God isn't. But to the question, what is my purpose? For a long time, my life didn't have a purpose. I was a young, good-looking man having a great time. I didn't need a purpose. But back around Y2K, I found myself motivated to combat the endless lies and nonsense coming from creationism and their parent company, Christian nationalism, which I saw a quarter century ago as becoming the exact threat that our nation is facing now. My purpose was and is to get in the way of that. I'm not a hater. I appreciate all that I can. Just having the attitude that I do means that I've had a pretty good life, even though I've never had much money. I've always had a good time. And I've heard it said that the beauty you see in everything is the beauty you feel within. That's how I feel about the natural world. Not just now, but different eras in paleo history too. I love all of it. Animals, environments, people, life itself, being alive. I love improving my own understanding. That requires that I love truth. The only thing I hate is injustice. That includes lies. And God is a lie. My purpose is to promote what I do believe in. That means science and ecological balance with our natural environment, the potential humanism of humanity, our rights in the Constitution, and most of all, truth. Actual, factual truth. Not empty, unsupported assumptions of baseless speculation asserted as if it was truth with a capital T. No, the truth is what the facts are, what we can show to be true. If you don't care what the facts are, then you don't care what the truth is. And believers don't care what the truth is. They want to make believe something else instead, something that is demonstrably not true. That's why they assert their own bigoted, ignorant opinion as objective fact, and why they reject actual facts as if they're mere opinion. That, I think, explains much of our political situation at present. Just as several Christians have told me at different times in different ways that they're going to keep on believing even if they know it's not true, a Trump supporter told me they did not want to know the truth. They just want to believe whatever they want to believe, even if it costs them everything in the end. Abrahamic religion is authoritarian, opposed to freedom and liberty, and whenever religion has had power of rule over law, it has always resulted in a violation of human rights. That's why the religious right are denying your rights right now. The Founding Fathers designed this nation to be the very opposite of the type of government that is associated with Moses, one that allows freedom of religion and thought as well. That is the American ideal that I've always believed in. Theocratic monarchy was their model of what not to be. Yet, after generations of Americans being subjected to waves of religious revivalism fueled by the same sort of propaganda channels that religious apologists still use, then it's not surprising that so many have succumbed to the authoritarian dogma, believing whatever misleading narrative their preferred media sources tell them to believe. I believe churches should not only be taxed, they should be fined, because fraud is illegal in this country. All I'm doing is damning the endless attempted deceptions by religious apologists, confronting and correcting them with actual facts, things that we can show is really true. I'm doing no more than challenging devotees not to lie, not to say things we already know are not true. Don't say anything is true or the truth until you can show the truth of it, the evidence leading to that conclusion, because it is dishonest to assert baseless speculation as if it was a matter of fact. Yet that's what all religions do. When I call these apologists out for that, invariably their response is to defend lying, asking what's wrong with lying. Why does it have to be a fact before I believe it? Why can't I believe it even if it's not true? Just this week, someone accused me of believing that there is no real consequence for lying. But again, I don't believe that. I believe that there is a real consequence for lying. And it's because it's society mandated. You're conflicting with what other people need from you. It's not the unreal consequence for lying, which is eternal damnation. And believers don't even believe in their own ultimate consequence for lying. If they thought that God was the ultimate truth, why are they always lying for him? And once upon a time, if you claimed to know something to be true or a fact, but you could neither show that it was true nor how you could know whether it was true, then, but if you claimed it anyway, then you would lose all credibility and be branded as a liar, even if you didn't intend to deceive. I believe we need a grassroots response or a grassroots return to that kind of value, because now everyone is lying, blatantly, obviously, shamelessly, as if no one cares, or as nobody's listening anymore. It seems like I'm one of the few who still cares or believes in the fundamental value of real, honest truth. And that's why the evolution versus creationism debate ultimately isn't about science versus faith. It is literally truth versus lies. Thank you. Are we doing a Q&A? Raise your hands if you want. Okay.
So please wait for the microphone and speak directly into it. It's a directional mic. So first hand up.
Great speech. When I was in high school, I read a survey that 93% more or less of Americans believed in God. And then in 2007, the percentage of nuns went up to like 16%. And I think last year Pew said it was now 28%. Do you foresee a time where the nuns will basically be the dominant culture in America and religion will basically kind of take a back seat?
I saw that, but it was supposed to have happened decades ago. So something happened that I didn't expect. I didn't expect people to vote for Trump twice. I didn't expect people to elect Marjorie Taylor Greene twice. So twice, no, things don't have to make rational sense anymore. But we do need a grassroots response to this. Now, to what you were saying, what I saw when I became an activist, I mean, atheism represented something like 5% of the American population. We were very low down, but it was climbing. There were statistics that were showing there was a sudden bump. With the advent of the internet, there was a sudden bump in atheism. And then I remember when we outnumbered Jews in this country. And then a few years later, we outnumbered Catholics in this country. And then just a couple of years ago, we outnumber Protestants. We don't outnumber all of them, but we are a significant demographic. And the misinformation campaigns have only amped up because of that. They want to advertise that their Christianity is growing, and Islam is the fastest growing religion, but Christianity is somehow growing too. And the way they base this is off birth rates. But they don't understand that atheism is not based on birth rates. We're based on attenuation of those other religions, of people growing up and saying, yeah, this is a bunch of bullshit. That's where the atheists come from. So we don't have a reliable statistic yet, but we are reasonably 1/3 of the American population. Anyone else? Yes.
I suppose this is a bit of a chicken and egg problem, but you know, the thrust of your presentation today was kind of the religious sentiments and how they're kind of just this willing to believe, right? So I guess the chicken and egg problem is when that's being used to enforce a preferred social order, and science denial and those other social aspects. Which do you think is the higher? I guess which do you think is more pragmatically effective?
Could you
Focusing on
paraphrase that question? Because I was not familiar with what you're talking about. The
so,
social order? What are you talking about?
Preferred social orders like hierarchies, and the denial of trans people and intersex people's existence, for example, is what that's very prominent to me.
Okay, so where some of us are arguing for equality, others are
Yes.
arguing for a social. Yeah,
Yes,
I get you.
to impose their preferred social order.
Yeah, it's a funny thing with me. I mean, it's not the trans issues are not my subject. I don't know all of the science involved. I've talked to people who do, and they're much more fluent than I am. And I think that trans activists can justify their positions on a number of scientific claims. But the issue for me is, why do they have to? Right. Because I thought we lived in a country that guaranteed pursuit of happiness and freedom of expression. Why the fuck is it a problem for me? If whatever, I don't care if you're a penivore or a vegetarian. I don't care which restroom you use. Wash your hands. That's it. But other people that make that their top priority, and I don't understand how somebody's world can be so perverted that that's important to them, that they deny someone else their rights. Did I answer?
The question was more kind of the chicken and egg problem is whether it's like more pragmatic or effective, perhaps, to get to the underlying lack of reason and that willing making belief about how the world is, or to kind of focus on the individual skirmishes, because the trans issue is just one example of other ways that they're trying to naturalize their preferred social order.
I think if we want to properly understand anything, we have to remove the religious aspect of it. When you cite religion as your motivation or reason for any action or position, then you still have not given a reason. You have to give something that stands up without the religious belief. And when we're evaluating people's rights, I think without the religious bigotry, then I think we can achieve equality. I hope I answered that. I certainly don't believe in a hierarchy. I'm white, and I'm happy with who I am. I'm perfectly comfortable in my own skin. I'm very lucky that I get to live the life that I have. I'm not proud that I was accidentally born white, just like that I'm not proud that I was accidentally born in this country. I believe in some of the ideals that were behind this country, but a lot of other people believed in that who didn't live here and came here because they believed in that. So I put myself in that same category. Anyone else?
Anybody?
So I really appreciate your work on evolution, the scientific side of everything. What's your favorite extinct clade?
Acanthostega gunnari is the fossil representation of the Darwin fish that you've seen on your bumper stickers. I can't imagine a more perfect transitional species than that.
Awesome. That's right. I like Eurypterids.
Me too.
Cool. Thanks for your work.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Anybody? There we go.
I'm curious your opinion on the use of AI in the debate space, because I've noticed when I debate religious extremists, I tend to notice exactly where they copy and paste something they just got from like ChatGPT, and then they add a little bit after to seal the deal. I'm curious if you think we're going to get to a point where AI just refuses to agree with them regardless of their position.
I would like to get to a point where AI lives up to its name. Because right now we're looking at artificial ignorance. I got into it with a religious apologist who was bragging that I was wrong, and she proved that by getting ChatGPT to acknowledge the existence of God. And my response to that was to get a Christian Bible scholar to get on the show with me to say, yeah, she's completely full of shit.
ChatGPT tends to be an over-flattering yes man most of the time, so it just sides with you on whatever position you take.
Yep, evidently. On the whole, I don't appreciate. I love that AI can make things so easy, but it does that at the expense of actual artists and writers, and that's my biggest problem with it.
I love how directly confrontational you are with bullshit. There is, but what has stopped me in my own lifestyle and history of being more confrontational with bullshit is that there are limits to the ability of humans to process reason and evidence, and it's based upon emotions, and so there seems to be a very frustrating difficulty in using rational arguments to make progress. And so, for instance, the best way to maybe for religious people sometimes to become a little more open-minded about having someone who is different, who believes differently from them, is to actually have an emotional connection to someone. And so it's this idea that you have to make an emotional connection in order to make that bridge somehow. I need to make a question out of this. But how optimistic are you for the possibility of social change given the frustrating limits to, well, I'm going to call it your approach to being directly confrontational with bullshit, given, I want to give one social science observation, is that some studies have shown that if you take people who believe strongly in some social position or political position and then make them read the best arguments against their position and then survey them, they believe their own position more strongly. That's a kind of a general social science argument.
What's the name
it's
for that?
really frustrating. How do you...
That's, backfire effect, yeah. So I don't think that the emotional connection means anything. My own mother criticized me I was criticizing Mormonism at 14 years old. And she says, you don't know anything about Mormonism, so you're a hypocrite. And I'm like, you know what, you're right. If I'm criticizing something I know, that's hypocrisy. Bring over your Mormon missionaries and have them talk to me. So she did. So now I'm a 14-year-old boy meeting with a handful of 18-year-old boys who are all called elders. And they're all saying this ridiculous crap. And I'm having a great time with them. At 14, I'm having a great time with this ridiculous belief system. And they give me a paper that outlines their belief. And when they leave, I come to my mom and I say, so, you believe whatever Mormons believe? Yes, absolutely. I believe whatever. What do you believe, Mom? I believe what the Mormons believe. Even if she doesn't know what it is, she believes what she's told to believe. Okay, so you believe X and Y. We don't believe that. Says here you do. The people you brought into the house says here that's what you believe. She grabbed the paper out of my hand and threw it in the trash. We don't believe that. I go to get the paper out of the trash again. She stands between me and the trash can. She knows that I know that she knows that it says that, while she's telling me that it doesn't say that. Do we have my mother and child? Do we have an emotional connection? My mother will lie to her own kids in defense of a belief system she knows is already fucked up. That she doesn't believe the thing that it says that she believes. The fuck? Wouldn't the rational thing would be to say, yeah, you know what, I don't believe that. No. Believers don't go the rational way. They go the emotional reaction way. My own family, I've lost more people in my family. Most of them could handle the fact that I didn't believe in God. When I didn't believe in the orange God, cut off all communication.
Aaron, thanks for coming out again.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime, sir. I was having a argument with my own dad some time ago, and he brought up the phrase, would you want to be right or do you want to be friends? And I was kind of at that moment, I said, I want to be right. you know, it's kind of like, if you're going to believe that nonsense, I don't really want to have you in my in-group. But to kind of expand on that.
Same answer I would give.
But to kind of expand on that, it was, it seems to me like there's always been some kind of in-group, out-group pressure in society, maybe even call it evolutionary something. You want to be on the inside. But, you know, throughout the history, it's been like, you know, religion or some powerful figure or a government, and even vanishingly small, age of reason, if you will. It just seems to me that religion in particular, of whatever form, always seems to be the most resilient of the ones to keep rising up. Wonder if you might have a...
It's a system of control. So they understand how sales work. They understand all the different methods of manipulation, emotional manipulation, all kinds of things. Look at the way that the clergy has positioned themselves. So you know nothing. You know dick about jack. You've got no qualifications whatsoever. But if you claim to believe a certain stupid lie, you can get into the clergy and be treated as if you have wisdom you don't own. And then you will be given special political power and extra money you didn't deserve, and also private access to people's children. All because you pretend to believe in a stupid lie. It's a wonderful setup for horrible people. There's no truth involved in it. It's exactly the opposite of scientific methodology. That's my problem with it. That's why I said on the issue, do I have to agree with stupidity, with lies, in order to have you still in my family? I'm sorry. I've lost too many family members to value anybody else. You know, I've had the closest people in my family have told me, I don't want to know the truth. I guess we got nothing to talk about.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are we going to get to see Matt Dillahunty now?
I don't schedule that, man.
Yeah, I want to see the Unholy Trilogy again, you know, so.
I would love to do that.
Yeah.
He's taken up he's got a snake breeding business that keeps him busy.
Oh.
Yeah, I only have like 56 snakes at the moment. He's got hundreds. Yeah. It's a funny thing. My wife and I we were going to a reptile convention. We get out of the car. We somehow accidentally parked like one car over from Matt and Arden. They're getting out of the car to go to the same convention. Unbeknownst to each other, entirely coincidentally, we had both accumulated 56 snakes. We had just both gotten into the same thing at the same time without any... Isn't that weird?
Two questions for you. Are you working on another book? And do you have any plans to run for public office in Texas again?
I am not going to run for public office again. I was in politics just long enough to know that I don't want to be in politics. I'm no good at begging for money. I was all about doing a debate. I so wanted to do a debate against the guy I was running against. That would have been so much fun. I would have so humiliated him. But unfortunately, most of politics, from what I can see in Texas, is just begging for money, and I just don't have that in me. So I'm not going to do that again. What was the other part of your question?
Are you working on another book?
Oh, I'm supposed to be. Just things have gotten really, really busy. I mean, I've got one in the works, one that I really want to do. It's just all of the other things that I'm trying to do all at the same time. If anybody that remembers dial-up internet connections, try to imagine you're downloading 3 movies at once. How long does it take to get anything? That's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing so much that I'm not getting anything done. Yeah. But thank you for the question.
Thanks for being here. 2 questions too. How do we get money out of politics if we can? And any ideas would be great, because that's a question that's been in my mind for about as long as I've watched you, which is over 10 years. And you've done hundreds of hours of debates and interactions. Are there any that you would recommend as what are some of your best, or what sticks in your mind as some of those moments that are important to you, or good, bad, and the ugly, whatever?
I did a couple of series based on Kent Hovind. I mean, there's a couple of actual debates, and there was one that was in a video interaction that I'm particularly happy with. Hovind pulled all of his part of that, but I uploaded my own copies of that. So if you want to look up, Aron-Ra versus Kent Hovind, there's a long series, and I think it's funny that everything he says is so completely stupid. That's why he pulled it off, right? And he wouldn't even finish the debate. He said he might maybe get to a completion point maybe years from now. But in reality, what he would do is he would try to play my video and then talk to the people in his little office. So he'd stop it every few seconds to try to rebut whatever I'm saying without even understanding what I'm saying. And it's real obvious. So I had so much fun with Kent Hovind that my wife accused me of cheating. Yeah, he is. What an incredible hypocrite, right? Where Jesus says that you cannot get divorced and marry again. How many times has he done this now? And he just gets to pretend he wasn't married before. Oh, I could do that. Were there any more? Yes.
Right here. I want to follow up a little bit. John kind of used his psychology background and asked you a question about how the emotions tied in, and he cited some research there. And then the next gentleman asked a question about, I forget his exact question, but it came up that the methods the Christians used came up, and you referenced that they know the methods to use, and it seemed to be implying they know psychologically how to reach people and so on.
Emotionally, yeah.
Emotionally, yeah. And so I want to tie in. To me, that felt a little contradictory, and I'd just like to understand the difference in responses there, where you used your mother as an example, that the emotions didn't really have an effect, but then cited that the Christians know all the emotional techniques.
Connection. So in the case that he was bringing up, we're mother and son. So what better connection could there be? So we have an emotional attachment to each other, but she's not going to respect anything I say. And she told me when I was a little kid that she loved Jesus more than me, and that we're supposed to be that way. That I'm supposed to love some guy I've never met more than the people who really are in my life. So I was just always a rational person to some degree. I mean, I was misled, I was misinformed, I was taught all kinds of crazy things, but I eventually came out of it. And other people in my family, even if you raised them right, they would still lapse into woolly thinking.
Got it. Thanks. I was missing that nuance.
Yeah.
There was somebody back here,
I just wanted to answer that one gentleman's question on. There's literally an organization that's called moneyoutofpolitics.org, and so you can join up with them. On July 27th, they're going to do like a 2 million man march on all the state capitals, including the national capital.
and over here. Where was it?
Hello.
Hey.
Let's see. I saw you at a presentation in Scottsdale a couple years ago where you came out as a Satanist. So I'm wondering if, are you still self-identifying as a Satanist, and have you had to defend that choice in like atheist and secular spaces?
It's surprising what controversy comes up from that, and I knew it would. You know, there were atheists who got angry at me identifying as a Satanist. I'm not believing in a devil. I don't believe in magic. I don't believe there was a literal Satan. I'm playing a punk game against the Christians is what I'm doing, right? I have always looked demonic. Okay, I mean, I was accused of being a devil worshiper so many times in my life. You listen to AC/DC, right? I was 11 and I was accused of being a humanist, right? It just got worse from there. So I listened to heavy metal. I rode a motorcycle. I played Dungeons and Dragons. Right. So I just got tired of all the satanic panic thing. So when I realized, when I started reading what Satanic Temple was doing as far as activism for church-state separation, I was I was proud to even know of any of these people. And so I decided I'm going to show support. I'm going to join this organization. And I knew there was going to be a fuck ton of people that got upset about it, didn't understand what the hell I'm doing. Don't care. You're going to accuse me of this anyway? I may as well just dress the way I normally do, put some fucking horns on, and come out and meet you. Right? I was a keynote speaker at the first SatanCon. And when they invited me to speak, they did not know that only a week earlier that I had signed up to become a member. So I was delighted with that. Any more?
I've been enjoying your YouTube channel for a few years, the
Thank
science lectures, but especially your willingness to engage and debate people who absolutely cannot be wrong. And I'm just wondering how aware you might be of people with delusions of grandeur and manipulating psychology. How aware of you that some of these people just might have some serious diagnosable personality disorders?
There was a video of Alex Jones happening across Bernie Sanders in an airport. I flew a lot at that time. I so wish I could have been part of that, to stand between those. When I made when I did the advertising video to tell people that I was going to be at Secular Hub, I actually hoped that hostile people would show up just to see if they could put me to task. I'm actually disappointed. I had so much fun at SatanCon. Did I address your question? Yeah. Thank you.
How did you end up engaging with the Texas State Board of Education? And if you could wave a magic wand, who do you think should decide what kids are taught in public schools?
Oh. The way I see it, all of the arguments for creationism have been proven wrong, every one of them. There's not a benefit of doubt. It is entirely fraudulent, it is deliberately deceptive, it is wholly dishonest. Creationism needs to be fined, expelled. And mainstream science needs to be taught. How do you do that when the creationists run the Board of Education? They don't anymore. Grassroots people, yes. How do you always call me when I'm on camera? I'm sorry, thank you. Mom. But when they can't verify anything, the truth of anything that they say, then I don't understand why we're giving them a benefit of the doubt. You have the right to make believe whatever the fuck fairy tale you want to. At home. In school, we're going to teach reality. That's the way I would put that. And the other problem is it's not just the Board of Education. I've also testified to the State House, and they're always trying to put the 10 Commandments in schools. And how many times can I go up and explain? You don't follow the 10 Commandments. You don't even know what they are. Look up Exodus 34. It's a whole different set. The first time that the Bible ever describes the 10 Commandments as the 10 Commandments, it's a different set. And it's a set that tells you, instead of honor your father, your mother, it tells you why you're supposed to honor your father and mother in Exodus 20. It's because in Exodus 34 it says, because if you don't honor them, they can kill you. I hate having to explain this to people. They don't care about the reality. They don't care about truth. They are all about lies. And it's so frustrating.
This has been many, many years, but you had the idea for a project from the folder within a folder within a folder on your computer of species and known fossils. Yes. What's the status of
The
that?
Phylogeny Explorer project exists, and it's still in a difficult phase. It was online. It was available for a number of years. But for the last 3 or 4 years, and having largely to do with the Ukraine thing. Can I call you back later? I'm still addressing an audience. Okay? Thank you. You there? She doesn't know I called. She doesn't know she called me. Okay. A butt dial, I guess. Where were we? What were we talking about? Oh yes, the Phylogeny Explorer project that we're on like database number 6 because we had already achieved the largest cladogram ever conceived by anybody. We had more living and fossil. And there's a number of other groups that were doing like I forget what the names of these are, but there's some that only focus on extant organisms. We were focusing on fossils as well, so we had to come peer-reviewed articles to include all of the fossil organisms and then try to spend on. And somebody got the brilliant idea that hey, if we do a little bit of work in the background, we can make this thing where you just push one button and we'll bring in 2 million taxa from this other site. Unfortunately, that's been 4 years of trying to fix it so that you can push the button one time. I'm so upset. But one of the engineers that we had was living in Ukraine, the primary engineer. So that's obviously not working out right. So we're hoping to be, it's back online sort of, but not at full scale yet. And one of the biggest issues that we have is that we're doing all this with volunteers. We did have a donation of like 120 British pounds, and that's what got it going. But there's some things that need continuous money for upkeep for a major website like that. Yeah, but thank you for the question. It's one of the best things I was ever involved with, and I'm so frustrated that I can't just show people right now. Were there any more?
No theists? I was looking forward to seeing that. Oh, she's not a theist.
Wouldn't that have been fun?
Sorry to disappoint, but my question is about one.
Okay.
I noticed you answered your calls from your mother. That's very sweet. Does she still stand between you and the trash can?
My mother was the one that says she didn't want to know the truth. What do you do with that?
Hi, thanks, Aaron, for coming. Satan doesn't exist. I think we can all agree on that. But
yes,
the
I am.
language, the language and symbols associated with Satan can be scary and embarrassing to both religious people and like ex-religious people, atheists alike. They can find these symbols horrifying. What is the value of atheistic religions like Satanism in 2025?
I'm on the board of directors for American Atheist 501c3. But as we are a nonprofit, there's only so much we can do with regard to religious freedom. Our organization tried to put up a competing atheist platform when they wanted to put up the 10 Commandments in some state. I can't remember. I think it was Florida. And they put up some nice little homage to Carl Sagan. But the problem is Christians didn't understand what the fuck it was. They think they invented science. So they think every homage to science is an homage to Christianity. They don't know. There's only so much that a non-profit can do that a recognized religion can do. So when they want to put up the 10 Commandments someplace, the Satanic Temple comes up with their statue of Baphomet. When they want to do the Good News Club, the Satanic Temple comes up with their, After School Satan. Brilliant. Brilliant. American Atheists can't do that. Now, being on the board of American Atheists, I can't, as a representative of American Atheists, I can't do certain things, but being a member of Satanic Temple, I damn sure can. So that's the advantage.
Can I be the last one? So how often do you feel like you actually get through to somebody that's in the process of recovering from religion? Are you ever aware of that even?
I am so glad that this is the last question of the night. And it's the best. Because while I've been doing this for a really long time, I have for better than a decade, I have been getting messages, private messages on comments on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever, that almost daily, for a decade, former believers thanking me for having walked them out of their delusion. Thank you.
Okay. Wasn't expecting that, but hey. So yeah, again, just apologies we couldn't have Seth here, but I hope you enjoyed this nearly as much as as you would have done. Ron, I did open describing a scene that Len and I witnessed with Aaron at Red Rocks when somebody came up to him and thanked him for helping him see the light, literally. It's just amazing what Aaron and people like Aaron do. Thank you so much for taking the time to come to Denver, to the hub.
It's so weird that you're thanking me. You are an amazing host, and you're a really good friend. I should be thanking you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. As much as I would love to make it about me, Aaron, we really appreciate you. The questions were great. Your talk was great. I was not sure what to expect, and I'm glad that I didn't know what to expect because I really enjoyed everything that you took us through. So on behalf of the Secular Hub, on behalf of everybody here tonight, thank you so much, Aron-Ra.